Yeah, I didn't bring my talit this morning because we're starting a new religion. It's a new branch of Judaism. So I'm not sure what to call it yet. Anyway, just a couple of random thoughts on the parasha. Before, though, on the nature of addiction, I'm no stranger to addiction. We grew up with our family, no one has a monopoly on dysfunction, but some families have a capital D on that. And my younger sister died at 29 in Sinai Hospital with full-blown AIDS because she was addicted to needle drug use, and she contacted a bad needle. And so for 10 years, she struggled with the HIV virus. And back in those days, that was like, I think our daughter was 2 years old. So you're talking, about 20, almost 30 years ago, 32 years ago. So back then they didn't have the drugs, but it was a terrible thing. And my dad looked at her, and it just he made one comment. Shouldn't be talking about all this, but he said she looked like she had just come out of Auschwitz, because that's what full-blown AIDS does. But addiction, one of the things we have to understand about addiction is not the problem for the addict. Addiction is the solution, and so we need to look at it differently. The other thing is, one rabbi, medical doctor, also out of Gateway, which Twersky, wonderful great rabbi Abraham Twersky, Lord willing, may he come to know the Lord if wherever he is. But he made the comment that addicts are just like everybody else except more. Really, if you think about that, because we all struggle with these things, it's just that this becomes almost relational to that person. There's a sense of wholeness and a sense of being by connecting with a substance and or a behavior, because a behavior can become addictive. The other thing I just wanted to say on the parasha, I think Olivia, boy, everybody's so grown up. Olivia, I can't believe it. She was like this. But also David, we saw David Gale. He says, "Is that David Gale?" He kind of looks intimidating, David. It's like, good, Jay. Good, keep it up. Keep up the good work. But, I think Olivia mentioned the fact that she quoted that verse in the New Testament, the way to heaven is narrower and few there be that find it. And all that is the remnant. You see, all throughout the text, all throughout the old economy, there was always, you have to understand, there was always a faithful remnant. There was always a righteous remnant. And the righteous remnant looked upon the greater part of the nation as almost like preventing Israel from fulfilling its calling to be an instrument of light to the nations. The few that were faithful looked upon the unfaithful, which was the greater part of the nation, as those who were preventing Israel from fulfilling their calling. And so the prophets, which we talk about, the prophets' primary purpose was not to predict, but was to foretell and call the people back to covenant faithfulness to what came before. And that's why that's a tremendous argument against replacement theology, that truth builds upon truth. And so you have the Torah, the prophets are calling the people back to what came before, the writings are calling the people back to the prophets, and the New Testament is built upon that. And so when we get to the New Covenant scriptures, we can't look back to the text, because that does violence to the text. We can't look back to the text and reinterpret what came before. We can add to it. We can bring nuance and flesh it out, but we can't change what came before. The text isn't fungible. It's not like silly putty. You can't just violently take it and twist it. And one of the biggest problems today, is reading the Old Testament as having a primary application for the church. Now, when you first hear that, it sounds wrong. You can't. What the biggest disaster today is reading the Old Testament scriptures as having a primary, keyword, application for the church. Of course, it has application to the church. One person said the text only has one meaning, but 1,000 applications. So one thing, just on the real quick on the parasha. It's amazing. The nations were to look upon Israel. They would look upon this absolutely righteous, exemplary constitution and they were to see the wisdom of the God behind it. Because Israel had established special years, right? They had the Shemitah and the Yovel, they had the sabbatical year and the Jubilee, right? And these were wonderful ways of God preventing the accumulation of wealth by a select few. It was a way to redistribute periodically and bring things back to where they were. So those who would, because slavery in Israel was not like slavery in the world. That was cruel and harsh. Slavery in Israel, do you realize, was basically to pay off a debt, and it was the nature of which was such that the actual servant could get to a point where he loves his master and wants to be forever joined to that master. Now, what someone in the New Yeshua said that Moses spoke of him. Where did Moses speak of Yeshua? Well, this is one particular place. It shows us the nature of the servant and the master, that he's the king, he's the servant, and we essentially are slaves to him. We're servants, but in a right kind of relationship, the servant or the slave would never want to leave the master. And so Moses did speak of Yeshua. Last thing I just want to say, like on the, you realize when we get to Leviticus chapter 25 and 26, this is the tail end of a section that is basically one of three sections in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament, that talk about and testify to the fact of the nature of the covenant documents. The best scholarship in the world today, Jewish and Gentile biblical scholarship today, does not read the Old Testament as that which is harsh over against the grace in the New Testament. Back then, God was harsh and he was like vindictive, but when we get to the New Testament, oh, there's love and grace. That's not what's going on there. There is the idea of God blessing Israel with a national constitution, that there was a priority with judicial issues. You can't have a country, you can't have a nation without laws. But when Israel, Israel would respond to God in grace and love. God never required perfection. All he required was obedience and fidelity to a system of sacrifice and forgiveness. And so you jump over to the New Testament and you have people like Zechariah who walked blamelessly in all the commandments. So where does that come? What does that mean? Well, obviously, one of the big misinterpretations within the Christian circles, not all, but some, is that God required perfection. He didn't. There was a system of grace and there was a system of fidelity to the covenant. So if a person walked in fidelity, he would be righteous. It doesn't mean he was perfect. But the whole point of this is that we've got to get away from this idea of this cookie cutter thing where the Old Testament is harsh and vindictive and the New Testament is loving and grace. What Leviticus chapters 19 through 26, along with the entire book of Deuteronomy and Exodus chapter 20, it's written in a style of writing called covenant document, in which the Mosaic revelation was patterned after an ancient treaty that was very common in those days, in which there was a king who was perceived as benevolent, and he would do something. He would basically save the lives of his subjects. And you see that in the first of the Ten Commandments. In Jewish understanding, the first of the Ten Commandments is not that shall have no idols. It's I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God that took you out of the land of Egypt. I saved your life. I did all this for you when you didn't have a chance. All I'm asking from you is simple obedience. This is the framework of the Old Testament. You see it in the Ten Commandments. You see the entire book of Deuteronomy with the preamble and the stipulations. You see it in Leviticus chapters 19 through 26, the tail end of which we read today. So God is not this vindictive God. He's a gracious God. He provided Israel with the most exemplary, gracious constitution that the nations were to look upon him, and they were to see the wisdom and the love behind their commandments that dealt with economy and relationship and military, all that kind of things. But this section is really the tail end of these covenant documents in which God patterns his revelation after these ancient treaties in which the king or the suzerain would save the subject's life, and what they're asking is simple obedience. So we have to see continuity between old and new covenants.